you. Good morning. As Chair of Dorset Council's Licensing Committee, I'm Councillor Emma Parker. I would like to welcome you to our virtual licensing subcommittee. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few ground rules. The meeting has to be a public meeting and is being broadcast live on YouTube. Apart from the three councillors, during the meeting, please put your microphones on mute, and can you also turn your cameras off when you are not speaking. Only turn your camera and microphone on when you are invited to speak by the chair. If you have not been introduced before speaking, could you please state your name? After each party has spoken, the chair will go around all parties, starting with the members of the subcommittee to see if they have any questions for the speaker. There is a chat box, and this chat box is purely for technical issues and not for general comments. It will be monitored throughout the meetings, but it will not be monitored by us councillors that are on the subcommittee. I'd like to do some introductions. I'm Councillor Emma Parker, and if I could introduce my other two councillors. Councillor Pipe.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Bill Pipe. I represent the people of Litchett Minster, Upton and Litchett Travers, and I have conducted a site visit of the application, but without prejudice. Councillor
Weller.
Good morning, Councillor Weller. I represent Rodwell and White Regis in the south of the county, and I too have looked at the site with no predetermination of the issues.
And before we go any further, I would just like to say that I attended a site visit as well. Thank you. Now I've had my councillors introduce themselves. I'd like to go to the council officers for them to introduce themselves to the committee, and I would like to start with the committee clerks, please.
Good morning, Chairman. It's Kate Critchell, Senior Democratic Services Officer, clerking this meeting today.
Thank you. And our legal representative?
Good morning. My name's Lara Autry. I'm the solicitor for the council.
Thank you. And our licensing team leader for today, please.
Hi, it's Catherine Miller. I'm licensing officer standing in for Aileen Powell, who's had to attend on a personal matter, so will not be able to attend today.
Okay, thank you. And if I could just get Elaine for you to introduce yourself as well, please.
Yes, I'm Elaine Tibble and I'm a Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. I will now ask the parties and their representatives in attendance to introduce themselves, starting with the applicant. So if I could start with Mr. Seal, please, just to say hello so we know that your microphone's working and everything.
Good morning. I'm Christopher Seal. I am the gentleman who started Seals Cove here this morning.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And do we have Mr. Nixon?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Yes, it's Chris Dixon here.
Thank you. And do we have Mr. Elford?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, Luke Elford from Woodsworth.
Thank you very much. I've got two people down wishing to speak. Please let me know if I have that incorrect information. The first person that I have down wishing to speak today would be Mr. Cross. No? Are we having technical issues?
Hello, Emma. It's Kate Critchell. He's definitely in the meeting space, but maybe he's just not at his screen at the moment. So I'd move on for now.
Yeah, I take it you can hear me, but just to notify you that I do actually have two different screens popped up on my screen, so I'm not sure if it needs readdressing.
Yeah, I'm just having a look. I'm not quite sure what's happened here.
No.
I think my screen is coming up for some reason. Roy's saying to stop sharing, but I don't seem to have a stop sharing button coming up. Sorry. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I don't know if you
yeah,
hear me.
sorry. Is that better? That's still odd, isn't it? This one here. That's it. That's not sharing, is it?
Hello.
Sorry,
Mr. Cross?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, we are having just a couple of technical difficulties at the moment. But we yes we can hear you. So at least you're on. That's our Okay, so we've just had Mr. Cross introduce himself. If I can ask Mr. Middleton.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Thank you. Okay, now we know that everybody is on. Can I just confirm, Elaine, that I'm not missing anybody, because I did only have 2 intentions to speak, but I do have more on the list. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anybody off that list.
Right, I've got on here, I've got Chris Seal, Luke Elford, Chris Nixon, and Simon Middleton, David Cross, and Kaylee Stone, and Stephanie King.
Okay, well,
on my list here.
I've got
and Lawrence Boone, but we don't think he's coming.
Right, well, I've got Kaylee Stone down as not speaking.
Yeah, she's not speaking, and Stephanie King's not speaking.
And Dr. King's not speaking either.
No, so there's 2 people that aren't speaking but are attending.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Now we will elect a chair for the meeting. Do I have a proposal from one of the other members of the subcommittee?
Could I propose you, Councillor Emma Parker, to be chair of the meeting? This is Councillor Bill Pipe speaking.
And Councillor Weller seconding.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any apologies for the meeting?
No, Chairman, there are no other apologies apart from Aileen Powell.
Okay, thank you very much. And councillors, do you have any declarations of interest?
None whatsoever from me.
And nothing from me.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any urgent business? Catherine?
Sorry, no, Chairman, no, Chairman, no.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so moving forward, the case before us today is an application has been received for a new premises licence for Cove Cafe Limited for the premises at Seals Cove, St Andrew's House, St Andrew's Trading Estate, Shoe Lane, Bridport, DT6 3XE. Now, if I could ask our licensing team leader to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, there's no representations have been withdrawn for this application. As you've said, the application is for a new premises licence at a multi-purpose venue called Cove Cafe Bridport. The applicant's solicitor has withdrawn some parts of the application in his letter of the 9th of July, which was circulated to all parties. The application is now for the supply of alcohol on sales only between 1100 hours and 2330 hours daily, with an additional hour on New Year's Eve and all national bank holidays. Regulated entertainment indoor only, live and recorded music between 2300 hours and 2330 hours, with an additional hour on New Year's Eve and all national bank holidays. And late night refreshment between 2300 hours and midnight, with an additional hour on New Year's Eve and all national bank holidays. Whilst it might look a little odd to see live and recorded music for only half an hour on the application, this is down to the Live Music Act of 2012, which simply means that any premises with an alcohol licence does not need to have music on their licence in order to have music between 8 AM and 11 PM. The Licensing Act descriptions means that outdoor sporting events and performances of dance are not considered to be licensable activities if they occur between the hours of 0800 and 2300 hours, subject to certain audience size limitations, so it's up to 500 people. There is no similar provisions for films. The solicitor has helpfully set this out in his letter of the 9th of July, the intended use of the premises. One of the objectors has kindly submitted his representation ahead of the hearing, and this has been circulated to all parties. We have sought clarification on the guidance documents referred to, and these do not refer to either the policy that the council works with or the 182 guidance, both of which you must have regard to. Before you hear from the parties, I just want to say something about the relevance of the representations. We always include the entire representations that we receive for reasons of transparency and fairness. However, only those parts of the representations that relate to the licensing objectives should be taken into account. And for clarity, those objectives are the prevention of public nuisance, prevention of crime and disorder, public safety on the premises, and the protection of children from harm, again, on the premises. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Catherine at this time?
Nothing from me.
Not on this occasion, thank you.
Okay, and if I could go to Mr. Seal, the applicant, do you have any questions for the licensing team leader at this time?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, obviously we don't have any representation from any responsible parties, and I would now like to go to the two gentlemen that are making representations. Do you have any questions at this time for the licensing team leader? That would be to Mr. Middleton.
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Cross, do you have any questions at this time?
No, I don't have any questions at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now I will ask the applicant to present their case, please. Mr. Seal.
Thank you, Chair. It'll actually be me presenting the application.
That's fine.
Mr. Elford, on behalf of Seals Cove Limited. First of all, thank you very much for arranging this remote hearing today. I appreciate its unforeseen circumstances, and it's very good to be able to have these hearings and be able to conduct business. As you've heard in your officer's very helpful report, this is an application for a premises licence. The applicant is a company formed by Mr. Seal, who I have with me today. He is a director of that company. The application site is a trading estate, and I won't bother you with too much of a description, as I understand you have all visited at one point or another. I can take you through the changes to the application if you wish, but I think they've already been set out by your licensing officer. Suffice to say, the rest of the application stays as it is, apart as do the hours. I'm going to come on to some conditions that I have put together with the applicant following receipt of the last-minute documents last night, and I will come to those in a moment. But I think the first thing to do is to talk a little bit about what this concept is. And the way I'm going to describe it to you is it's a little bit like a duck-billed platypus. It's incredibly difficult to describe, but you would know one as soon as you saw it. It's a family venue, and family is very much at the heart of what Mr. Seal is trying to do. And when we say family, we don't just mean parents with small children. We mean families of all age groups, including older people, younger adults, and so on. alcohol and entertainment is very much ancillary to the operation, a nice to have, if you will. And you are entitled to ask us why we have applied to you in the manner that we have. And the word I'm going to use is flexibility. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, we've applied for the ability to provide live music 7 nights a week. Are we going to provide live music 7 nights a week? Of course we're not. But we do need to be able to have that flexibility to cater for the demand of our customers. We do need that ability, and that's why we've applied in the terms that we have. And I'm happy to take any questions as to why the application is framed as it is. As you know, the application has received objections from interested parties, but I think it is worth noting that none of your experts, none of your responsible authorities have objected to this application, and that is down to the hard work of Mr. Nixon from Knight Training. In the course of submitting this application, Mr. Nixon provided a comprehensive operating schedule, including a number of conditions, and this was incredibly helpful in convincing the responsible authorities that they didn't need to raise any objections. I have, however, having looked at the objections before you, a number of additional conditions that I think deal with some of the concerns raised by those making representations. So if it's okay with you, I'll just run through those quickly now. I'm happy to email the wording in afterwards. The first condition, dealing with the concern about smoking, is that the premises licence holder will provide a smoking area for customers of the premises. Put simply, people have to smoke outdoors since the advent of the Health Act 2006. We want them to do so in a way that is conducive to promoting the licensing objectives. Any smoking area is going to be located sensitively so as to avoid the potential for any nuisance. And of course, that smoking area will be monitored by the premises licence holder, which brings me on to condition 2. The premises licence holder will monitor the use of the smoking area to ensure that customer behaviour does not cause a nuisance to local residents or businesses. It's just reinforcing that the premises licence holder will maintain their smoking area so as to avoid causing a nuisance. Third condition, very standard, notices will be displayed in the smoking area, reminding customers to respect the needs of local residents and businesses. There's obviously a fear that noise from this premises is going to cause issues here, and we've come up with a number of conditions that we think can allay those concerns. The first is a condition that no noise generated at the premises shall give rise to a nuisance to local residents. The next one is that the premises licence holder shall install a noise limiter set at a level whereby no nuisance is caused to local residents. Prior to opening to the public, the premises licence holder shall conduct a noise test to set the limiter at an appropriate level. What this means is, by conducting a noise test, the premises licence holder can ensure that no nuisance is caused to the local residents by setting limits that can't be exceeded and making sure that the musical amplification system is locked in such a way as to not be tampered with. I think I touched on this in my letter, but obviously we are incredibly mindful of the local residents and the feelings about this application. And one of the things we've undertaken to do is to provide a telephone number for the manager on duty in the unlikely event that there are any problems emanating from this premises. And we want to codify that as a condition on the licence, simply saying the premises licence holder shall provide a telephone number so that residents can contact the manager on duty. There seems to be a fear, unwarranted, we say, that this premises is going to metamorphosise into some kind of late night drinking venue come nightclub. Nothing could be further from my client's intentions. And so we're offering a condition that the premises shall not operate as a late night drinking venue. And furthermore, that licensable activities at the premises shall be ancillary to the use of the premises as a family leisure complex. Now, I know that there was some concern that the premises might be offloaded and someone else could come in and do something different. This, we feel, gives the reassurance on that front. There was also some queries about how we'll manage bookings. And to that end, we propose that the premises licence holder will incorporate the relevant conditions of this premises licence into any agreements for hire of any of the spaces. The premises licence holder will employ sufficient staff to manage licensable activities at the premises. We're looking at the moment at a minimum of 10 full-time staff and 10 part-time staff. But as the operation grows, that number is likely to increase. This is a lovely premises that's going to provide a lot of jobs in the local area. Of course, those staff will be trained, and we offer a condition that staff at the premises will be trained commensurate with their function within the business. Obviously, it stands to reason that different levels of training need to be given to the people that wash the pots and pans, to those who are managing certain areas. And finally, the premises licence holder shall ensure that a personal licence holder is on duty at the premises from 8 p.m. every day. Mr. Seal has taken the unusual step of already having trained at least 7 of his staff as personal licence holders, in addition to himself as the DPS. And we're mindful of the fact that the later hours are the sensitive ones. We will ensure that there is always a personal licence holder on duty from 8 p.m. We understand the concerns of the local residents. For obvious reasons, though, we can't accept that they're evidenceable. If the premises is operated badly, and I hesitate to say this because it's enormously unlikely that it will be, there are a whole host of powers to come back and make changes to this premises licence. We have looked through the late document that was sent through last night, and there are a couple of points raised in there that I'll just touch on. At one point in the document, Mr. Middleton says that they want to get everything right from the outset with this premises. We agree wholeheartedly with that approach. We want this licence to be granted in a form that is acceptable to us, the council and the residents from the get-go, and not to have to come back to make changes here and changes there and to undergo the time and expense that entails. There was a suggestion that we could apply for temporary event notices for the late night use. I will leave you in the hands of your learned legal advisor, but there are, of course, limits on the number of temporary event notices that can be given at any premises. I think it's also fair to say that despite temporary event notices being considered to be a light touch approach to licensing matters, the form actually runs to about 17 pages, and they're a lot more complicated than people think they are. I'm sure your licensing officers would agree with me on that. We'll of course listen to what the objectors have to say, and I would relish the chance to respond if there's anything that arises that we haven't already dealt with. And I will just conclude by saying that licensing is a permissive regime, and that we consider that this application should be granted unless there are really good reasons for you not to. We invite you to conclude that there aren't any good reasons not to grant this application. And of course, I'm happy to take any questions from you in relation to the application. That concludes my short presentation, unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pipe.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Elford.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. I note there's no representations from the responsible authorities who clearly have no objection to this. Can you just confirm that for me?
Yes, sir. There are no objections from any of the responsible authorities.
Okay, right. You say you won't allow this to operate as a late night drinking venue, but one of the purposes of obtaining a licence is to allow late night drinking. What do you call, or what do you see as being late night?
Well, so I'm not focusing on the time in the context of late night. I'm focusing on the type of venue. When I am talking about a late night drinking venue, I am talking about a venue that is run primarily as a high energy vertical drinking, much like a bar or a late night pub. This isn't that. This is a family leisure complex. The hours are simply to allow the flexibility for the premises to operate in the way that it needs to be able to cater for all of the customers. One example was in relation to the climbing wall at the premises. Now, it's expected that during the day, the climbing wall will be used by primary schools and secondary schools. And obviously, if it's being used by primary schools and secondary schools during the day, that means that in the evening, the amateur climbers and the semi-professionals will attend, and they will use the climbing wall. And then after that, they may like to retire to the restaurant diner and have a post-climb drink. It's something that I know from experience climbers tend to do. They will have their session and then they'll retire to some refreshments afterwards. So if they're climbing from, let's say, 6:30 till about 8:30, they're going to want a couple of hours after that to be able to have a drink, and we'd like for them to be able to do that along with having some food. Okay,
perhaps it was a wrong description at the outset. I now understand, and I'm happy with your description of what you see as what is not going to be a late night drinking venue. Thank you very much, Mr. Elford.
My pleasure.
Councillor Weller.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that presentation, because it's answered quite a lot of the questions that I jotted down in advance, so I don't need to ask those. I just would like you to clarify a little bit on how you see it functioning for children. So you've suggested that children will be using the climbing wall during the day, and if those are coming from schools, obviously they'll be supervised by their schools. So that solves that problem. But the soft play areas by their definition tend to be smaller children. When do you anticipate that bit of the operation will close? When will the last children be out from the soft play area, and your focus will then be on the more adult activities within the complex?
Sure, thank you, Councillor. So I'm going to transfer over to Mr. Seal in a second, just to answer your specific question on what time he envisages the soft play area closing. The soft play area isn't actually part of this application. It's not something that is licensable, albeit it is there within the context of the licensed premises. We have offered a condition that we're going to have a Challenge 25 age verification policy. Makes it incredibly unlikely any child is going to come into contact with alcohol. We want the flexibility to be able to have children in and around the premises at all times, and obviously that will be managed by their families. If it was helpful, and I'll need to take instructions from Mr. Seal, I would have thought that we could have had a condition that children will be supervised by an adult after a certain hour or later into the evening. We expect actually that they're going to be supervised at all times, but if your concern is the later hours in the evening, I'm thinking along the lines of, say, a 60th birthday party, where we don't think it would be inappropriate to have the children alongside the adults later into the evening. And obviously that will be up to the families to decide what hours they want, and we will work with them on that. And we'll move forward. Chris, would you mind just jumping in for a second, just giving some more clarity on the timings for the soft play area, please?
Yeah, hello there. Yes, we anticipate around about 8 8:30. Most of the children should be out of the soft play, but like Luke has just mentioned, if there is a party taking place, and then there's likely to be some crossover there. But yes, we believe around about 8:30, the main body of children will be out of the soft play.
Thank you. I mean, I appreciate that it's not a licensing issue, but it is the proximity of a lot of very hyper children when they come out of a soft play area, spilling out, and if they're at a party, of course, parents often drop them off, so they're not as supervised as they might be. So, but you're aware of that, and that's the important thing for you to be alert to that issue. So that's fine. Thank you.
Yes, we're going to risk assess events that take place at the premises to make sure that there are no issues. I understand what you're saying about the parties where children are dropped off and they're left in our care. Mr. Seal will correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that we will insist on having a suitable number of adults in relation to the children. We wouldn't just allow large groups of children to be dropped off with us. So, for example, the scenario I gave earlier about the schools and the climbing session, you would have the teachers and the guardians from the schools with the children. They wouldn't just be dropped off and left with us for a couple of hours while the teachers sneak off somewhere else.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just like I say, all the party rooms would be fully supervised. There won't be any times when they will be unsupervised.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Weller, do you have any further questions at the moment?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Could you put your hand down?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Councillor Pipe.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Elford, on the issue of noise, you're going to have a noise limiter. You're going to do a noise test. Have you all? Well, I know you're not in a position to have done this already, but will you consult a member of the Institute of Acoustics or a member of the Association of Noise Consultants when you come to do your sound check, and having done so, set your noise limiter accordingly? Do you intend to go down that route?
Yes, that's the usual procedure when you're setting a noise limiter. I mean, there's two ways of doing it. We can either engage your council's environmental health team, but I know that sometimes councils don't like being involved in setting noise limiters because they don't like potentially being on the hook if there are complaints after they've set a noise limiter. I've seen that happen before in the course of my day-to-day business. So yes, we will use someone who's qualified to set the noise limiter. It's not just going to be Mr. Steele standing outside, sticking a finger in the air and seeing if he can hear anything. On the subject of noise, the premises has been fitted with an entirely new roof that contains a significant layer of insulation, and all of the internal walls are similarly insulated. We don't think that there is going to be noise breakout from this premises, and of course the noise limiter is just yet another measure in the context of dealing with that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any further questions, Councillor Pipe?
Is my hand up?
Yes, yes, it is.
Is it down now?
It is. Thank you.
Oh, these things are so complicated.
Amazing. Thank you.
Technology.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Alford. A good detailed report. Thank you for that. Can I just touch on the smoking area? You've mentioned about the smoking area, about it being monitored. Can I just ask if the smoking area is going to be whereabouts in reference to the premises is that actually going to be?
Again, I think I'll need to hand over to Mr. Seal. Smoking areas, in my experience, are extremely difficult because you can have them. Some people don't want to use them. We're going to locate it in such a way as to be sensitive to local residents and obviously to our customers as well. So we're going to locate it in a place that's unfriendly to smokers. Forgive me if anyone smokes, I do apologise. Chris, can you suggest where you might locate the smoking area in the context of the premises?
Yeah, certainly. Sorry, just turn that 1 second. We haven't decided upon the best location as of yet, but I'm not a smoker myself, and the last thing that I would want for anyone, if you're sitting down with the children and having a meal and a drink, is having the smoke coming over. So we want to try and position it in such a way that it's going to not cause any issues. And I was just having a thought process then. If it's positioned at one end and you've got a wind coming through and it's blowing in, there might be a scenario where we could have 2 smoking areas depending on which way the wind's going, because the last thing I want is all the customers there and then the smoke coming over. So I haven't figured it out yet, but we are going to put a lot of thought into the best possible place for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Also, within the premises, obviously you've got designated sections for the sale of alcohol. Obviously you've got your what I would call your function rooms. Are you going to have what I class as pop-up bars in those function rooms for functions that would wish to have a bar within them?
Again, I'll hand over to Mr. Seal for the specifics. I think it depends on the nature of the function. We probably wouldn't have a pop-up bar at a children's birthday party that contained any alcohol at all, though you might have a small bar selling soft drinks and squash and juice and things like that. And an adult party, yeah, we may very well set up a small service bar, but in the main, everything is going to be serviced from the main bar located in the diner. Chris, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, Luke. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, it's been mentioned that this is more of a family orientated venture, and is obviously, that's the primary use for it. From this is the what I'm gauging for it. With your, there are some premises out there, and it's totally down to the discretion of the premises holder about some children being exempt from certain areas at certain times of the evening. Fully understand if it's a party, that's slightly different, but your main bar area, would there be a time there when you would actually have an exempt time, or would you think about doing the exempt time for children of, say, under 14?
Yes, I think so. In the context of the diner, it's actually sort of a diner style area rather than what one would call a pub or a bar. So you've got the ability to have alcohol, but also the ability to have food. We don't envisage children using that area without any form of supervision whatsoever. We think we're likely to have the younger children away from the premises by 8:30, 9 p.m. And I think we'd like, if possible, for it to be something that we could manage internally by setting our own rules rather than putting arbitrary time limits onto the licence. In the context of events, of course, we're going to risk assess those and we'll be looking for names of people who are coming, how many children there are, and we certainly wouldn't look to be scheduling events with large numbers of children late into the evening, unless it was a particularly special occasion like a grandfather's or grandmother's birthday or something like that.
Thank you. And overall, do you know what the maximum capacity is for the venue?
Yes, it's very difficult, and there hasn't been a final fire risk assessment yet. We believe that if you were to cram people into the party rooms just standing, and this will never be the case because there will be furniture, tables and chairs, and the pop-up bars you referred to, that those rooms could hold 60 people each, and that the diner can hold approximately 100, 120. It's highly unlikely that all of those rooms are going to be used at the same time, and that even if they are, they're all going to be at capacity. We will probably impose our own capacity figures on the rooms in the context of parties or events that is manageable to us. So for example, depending on the way it usually works with event spaces is that it's based upon the layout of the room. So if the event room is laid out to tables and chairs, the capacity might be 30. If the event room is laid out to half tables and chairs with a small bar and seating area, the capacity might be 40. But we're going to have to rely on the final risk assessment to have approximate numbers for those areas.
Okay, thank you. And another thing, with regards to
Councillor, I think you've put yourself on mute.
I have, sorry, apologies. With regards to your function rooms, how are you going to be advertising those for hire?
I'll hand over to Chris again in a second. I think the key point for me is, despite how these rooms are advertised, it's about how they're managed and the risk assessment that goes into allowing an event or saying no to an event. And Chris will speak to you about how he's going to advertise. Chris?
Hello there. The party rooms are going to be advertised via the website and internally when people come to visit the site. That's how we intend to advertise them. But primarily as function rooms for children's parties. That's how we'd like to try and go down that road. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one last question to me, which is going back to the soundproofing. You mentioned regarding that you've had the cladding on and you've got sort of like a thick insulation. Would you say that that's adequate enough as into a building that does have to have soundproofing for entertainment?
Well, I'm not an expert, but I'm confident that there's not going to be any problems at all. If the parties that my 6-year-old daughter and the parties that I've been to, the music that they have there is not going to cause a problem. It's not going to be. I personally believe it's not going to cause a problem at all, and I'm confident that it won't cause a problem.
Yes, I just think from my perspective as well, we're going to obviously get the acoustician in to deal with the noise limiter. And he will obviously be apprised of what the insulation is and how that works. And it may be he has other recommendations which we will implement in the course of his visit to help with baffling noise. These acousticians are brilliant. They can find ways around all sorts of problems. The other thing to say is that obviously any building work that we've done is going to have to pass building control, and they will be looking at it in the light of how the business is going to be used. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just going back to the noise limiter and so forth. Obviously, it is important to remember that obviously, 5 days a week from 8 o'clock until sort of 4:35. It's quite a busy industrial estate as it is, so it would be beneficial to have some sort of noise testing done on a day where potentially it might be relatively quiet, just to eliminate that as well.
Yeah, we're happy to agree to test in a way that is sensitive and takes into account the different times. It may be that we do multiple tests over different times and different days to get the levels exactly right.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you for answering all my questions. Councillor Pipe.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Alford, car parking, although not a licensable activity, as we all know, but there have been representations about the perceived lack of parking on site. How many spaces do you actually have exclusive use of? And do you anticipate off-site parking for instance, on local streets, particularly St Andrews Road and the like?
Going to have to hand over to Chris on the detail. As you rightly identified, parking's not relevant to licensing. And if there are parking spaces and people are able to use them, there is no reason why they can't do so. Obviously, we don't want anyone using anyone's driveways or anything like that. But Chris, how many parking spaces do you have or will you have by the time the premises opens?
I believe we have around 50 at present, and one of the ideas which I'm working on at the minute is running a bus service, a free bus service throughout the summer months, which would go from Bridport to West Bay, and would be able to ferry people in and out to alleviate some problems with the car parking. That's my plan at the moment.
Thanks, Chris. That's helpful.
Okay. Would you also run that service the other way at the end of the night?
Yes, we intend to run it on an hourly basis for free to ferry people in and out. That's what I'm intending to do.
Okay, so you have 50 at the moment. How would your neighbours feel on the industrial estate now? I'm not talking residential, but how would you stop your customers, for instance, parking in areas where they're not actually being a customer of that place?
Well, all the neighbours locally support it, and obviously throughout the 9 to 5 working hours, they're present at their units, and they would police their areas, and they don't have a problem in the evenings and after hours. And immediately adjacent to Seals Cove is a building which that we own, and we've got the use of the car park from 5 until 8 a.m. every day of the week as an extra overflow as well, just to help things flow along.
All right, if you own that building, then why can't you use the parking spaces outside of those hours? What's the condition?
Well, we've got tenants that rent the space from Monday till Friday.
Okay, you have a tenant in there. Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions for Mr. Steele or his representative? Okay.
Yeah.
Catherine, our licensing team leader, do you have any questions? Just one, really, I know I mentioned it in my opening statement, but just to clarify for Mr. Elford, in case people haven't seen the letter, when you refer to the reduction of the regulated entertainment, or sorry, anything similar to live music, you're referring to Part H of the application. So live music and recorded music stays from 2300 hours to 2300 hours. But anything of a similar description is reduced back to the 2300 hours. Am I correct?
That's correct. In my experience up and down the country, I'm yet to find anyone who knows what anything similar to live music, recorded music, or performance of dance actually is that isn't covered by the activities themselves. I've heard someone say karaoke before, and also burlesque, but it is not something we need for the purpose of this application.
No, that's fine. So just to let everybody know then, live music and recorded music will be up from 11 p.m. at night till 11:30 at night. And so that's live and recorded music, but anything similar will cease at 2300 hours. Does that clarify everything?
Thank you, Catherine. Yes.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Muted my microphone again. I think it's because I've got so much paperwork on my desk. Sorry. Mr. Cross, do you have any questions for the applicant at this stage? But bearing in mind, you will get your chance to speak shortly.
No, I don't at this stage. No questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And the same to Mr. Middleton.
Could I just ask Mr. Elford to clarify what he means by a vertical drinking model?
absolutely. If Mr. Elford would like to reply to that, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. The vertical drinking is like a traditional pub where people buy a drink. They can stand up, they can sit down, but primarily they'll stand and consume their alcohol standing up.
Thank you.
Mr. Middleton, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, I'm now going to ask any person who has made representation and has indicated they wish to speak on their attendance notice to address the subcommittee. May I remind each person that the subcommittee has read all papers before them, including all letters of representations, and not to repeat anything that is in your letters of representation, but of course you may amplify it. So if I could ask first for Mr. Cross, have you got anything that you would like to add, Mr. Cross, to your representation?
Good morning, councillors. No, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Sorry. Okay, no problems. Yeah, no, just my concerns really. I mean, as I say, you know, I've outlined my concerns with the property. I do work away. As I said, I do have concerns for drunk people using the footpath directly by the side of my property. And I just have concerns generally that is it a right place to be selling alcohol on an industrial estate when there's the Pymore Inn, there's the King's Head in very short distance. I do understand the business model of the Cove, but I still don't see the need to sell alcohol. Yeah, really, it's just the general concerns of drunk people and noise, extra traffic, and the problems that I'm going to encounter as a property quite close to Seals Cove.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, Councillor Pipe, do you have any questions for Mr. Cross?
None at all, Chairman.
Could you put your hand down, please?
I certainly will.
No questions from me either, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask Catherine, do you have any questions for Mr. Cross?
Just to clarify that any other amenities in the area, i.e. other pubs, are not relevant. It's each application on its own merits, regardless of what else is in the vicinity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any questions from the applicant, please?
None at all, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions, thank you. Then could I go to Mr. Middleton?
Hello.
Hello. Is there anything that you would like to add to your representation?
Okay, can I clarify that the representation I sent yesterday is not to be repeated now, but that can be amplified? Am I right in understanding that?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that the representation that I sent yesterday was taken into account. However, I'm conscious that many of the things that were raised were not actually thought of prior to my representation identifying them. Looking at the conditions that have been made by Seals Cove, it shows that they are listening, but I don't think that the concessions that are being made or the conditions that are placed are actually evidenceable at the moment. If I just take, for example, the smoking area, there is no indication of a smoking area on the Appendix 2 plan. And the fact that it wasn't raised until I pointed it out really shows that there wasn't preparation for that. Just in listening to the information from Mr. Seal and from his solicitor, there's quite a number of details which are seem to me to not sit with the information I was given by Mr. Nixon. For example, the maximum capacity that I was told for both the party rooms and the restaurant diner was that it would be 100 people maximum. And that excludes the outside area, which is by its nature unrestricted and has no seating. Now, they haven't been able to give us a clear and concise number of a maximum capacity. So I'm going to take from that my estimations in my representation of 100 people, which I was concerned about already, could actually be amplified considerably. This bus service and having parking limited to 50 spaces, if we think of an average family having 3 children, well, having 3 people, you're talking about 150 people for that car park alone. It doesn't seem to me that there's been the consideration of that to really help. And also, as part of my representation that I sent yesterday, the way that you manage very opaque and uncertain things is by reducing the licensing hours. And I think that that is a very reasonable thing to ask for, given the location they have chosen to situate this business. And as the mitigating agents have said to me time and again, these are leisure complexes that exist around the country, but they don't exist in the context of Bridport and its surrounding area. And I think it's important then for something that is described as a duck-billed platypus to be treated with some kind of caution. Now, my suggestion of temporary events notices, I think, is a perfectly reasonable one. And I know and I recognise that it will be an inconvenience to Seals Cove, but I think a level of inconvenience is to be expected for wanting to place this nature of a business on a trading estate alongside residential housing. And as I said in my representation, we as a community are not adverse to this business succeeding. And as I said in our representation, many of us have young children. We would be their customers. But as in my original representation, I said, I was surprised we had no consultation. Now, in all of the things that I've read, and Seals Cove have made note in their letter that no small amount of consideration has gone into their application. No small amount of consideration has gone into me preparing this. I've read an awful lot about the guidance for licensees for up and down the country, and best practice seems to be that you speak to the people in the dwellings and surrounding area, and you consult noise specialists. And none of those things as of yet have happened. And that tells me that really the considerations of the wider community and residents hasn't really been thought through. And the 11 to 11:30 licensing is incredibly liberal. And as Mr. Alford has described, he said that vertical drinking is a pub model. And they're trying to safeguard and speak to us about how this will not become a pub. I'm afraid, as he said, none of our concerns he feels are evidenceable. I don't feel that any of the evidence posed by the parties placing this application before us can be evidenced either. And if there is no guarantee, as there cannot be in this matter, we should err on the side of caution. And that doesn't mean that that straitjackets this business. It means that we act in the best way for all parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Middleton. Really appreciate your comments and your detailed representation that you've put in. It's been very useful. Can I just ask, is there any sort of appeasement there with regards to the conditions that they have offered today?
The conditions that we have today, I think when we look at them, they don't greatly impact the business. And if we look at the scope of the application, it is massive. And I think, I mean, again, I'm not kind of a legal representative, but I imagine that applications of this nature are placed with the maximum amount of things to be granted, knowing that certain things will be pared back. So I don't know how genuine those concessions are in the grander scheme of things. One of the things that I did raise in mitigation with Mr. Nixon, which was shot down very quickly, was about a limit to licensable hours. And when we had that conversation, I used the phrase that the mitigating agent took against, which was the idea that the application was asking for the most to get the most. And the response I was given by Mr. Nixon on behalf of Mr. Seal was that if they wanted the most, they would apply for 24-hour licensing and see us at a hearing. Now, from that, I understand that really there wasn't the option for us as residents to engage with them and for us to come to some kind of agreement. They are very clear in the window that they want. And I think it's, as residents, in our interest to urge this committee to take that into account. I feel that if this is given, it's a green light to them to use it in whichever way they wish.
I've just got one more question for you, and that's regarding around the timings. What timings did you have in mind?
I made a suggestion of 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., which is in keeping with the trading estate as it happens. I don't envisage that to be a permanent thing. but I see that to be a baseline and a starting point that we work from. And working from that as a starting point, I think, is important. We can then assess, and if you remember, none of this noise testing has happened. The insulation cannot be described in terms of specification or methods. We're just told it's thick and that it's in the roofing. But that is a description at best. If we had a baseline, we could build up, and we'd be perfectly happy if we weren't impacted at all, for then that measure to be moved.
Okay, and you're 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Obviously, we're going on the timings of that of 7 days a week. Yes.
I think there would need to be some consideration of Sunday trading, as there is currently no Sunday trading at all on the trading estate. Sundays at our houses are very peaceful. If we're to expect buses every hour, clearly the things that have been discussed here are going to have a great and detrimental impact on us as residents. And I think it would have been courtesy to have a discussion with us prior to that. And I just remind the licensing committee here, I don't just represent one individual, I represent 6 different households, some with very small children. We chose to live at this location because one of the perks of the trading estate is it is quiet, out of hours and at weekends, and this does threaten that.
Okay, I have no further questions. Councillor Pipe.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Middleton, thank you for your very eloquent rendition of your story thus far. You have said, and can you confirm that you have had no consultations at all with the applicant or his representative?
I've had 2 mitigating conversations with Mr. Nixon. The first several weeks ago lasted an hour, and the most recent was Monday that lasted 25 minutes.
Right, because you did actually say you said you haven't been consulted at all, but now you come and tell me you've had 2 consultations. Consultation
that prior to the application being put in. And from the things that I've looked into, and it's not just... Sorry, Mr. Middleton, are you talking about a notice prior to the notice of application? Yeah, I am. And everything I've looked into, every local authority and associated organisation suggests for licensees that it is worthwhile to communicate with people who would be directly impacted or potentially impacted prior to the submitting of an application. So we're actually talking about consultation that is happening kind of too far down the line. And as Seals Cove note in their solicitor's letter, they didn't consult with us prior to the application because they didn't think it was necessary. They felt that just having the signage was enough. Now, we may talk about kind of the legality of that, but I think just on a courtesy note, it would be worth having that conversation. If you're going to bring a business of this kind, which is untested in this area, perhaps it was worth engaging in a slightly more proactive way than waiting until it was mitigating. And when we talk about mitigating as a consultation, it was very much based on my objection. And that, to me, is not a baseline consultation of what would be acceptable, where would we go. We're already having to defend our position. Okay. Just one further point. It's quite clear that should a licence be granted to the premises, it clearly won't be in a position to function as with a drinks licence for quite some time. What sort of time period would you expect, or your residents expect, this place to be up and running, given the state that it's in at the moment? I don't feel I'm able to actually answer that question, given this premises, the nature of this business has changed considerably in the last 4 years. The last I heard, it had a very large children's play area, and that was the bulk of it. In looking at the plans on Appendix 2, the initial vision of this business that was described to us many years ago has morphed considerably. And it morphed, I think, from something that was a bit more recognisable to this duck-billed platypus that's being described. I can't tell you a timescale. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Simon.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Pipe?
No, thank you. I should take my hand down.
Councillor Weller.
Nothing from me. My hand's not up, is it?
No, but I just didn't know as to whether you had any questions.
No, I was just checking that. No, I have no questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Middleton, though. That was very, very helpful.
Okay, Catherine, licensing team leader, do you have any questions?
Yeah, can I just a few points to clarify with what's being raised? Just a smoking area, applicants aren't required to provide a smoking area for smokers. It's not part of it. So when the smoke-free regulations come in, they don't actually have to put a shelter up or anything. So if they're going to stand out and get wet, that's up to them. Capacity is not recorded on the licence. That is purely down to the fire risk assessment. With regards to consulting residents, again, you said it's best practice. It's not required. It's advertised at the premises and in the local paper, which the Licensing Act deems sufficient. And also regarding things like noise limiters, under the Live Music Act of 2012, any conditions relating to live or recorded music are suspended between the hours of 0800 and 2300. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you for clarification on that, Catherine. I appreciate that. If I can now go to the applicant, do you have any questions for Mr. Middleton, please?
No, thank you. Your licensing officer has just very helpfully dealt with everything I was going to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what I will do now is give everybody the opportunity to sum up their case, and I will do that in a reverse order. This will be your chance. I'm happy that I've heard everything that I need to. All my questions have been answered. I believe all other councillors' questions have been answered, but this will just give you a chance now to reiterate anything that you feel as though you would like us to consider. So if I can do that in a reversed order, so I'm going to be actually going back to Mr. Middleton again. Mr. Middleton, is there anything that you would like to add to sum this up?
I would only say that the compromises that I placed in the representation yesterday, I think, are reasonable ones. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to raise those with Seals Cove and their representatives. The licensing committee are looking at a case that has the potential to fundamentally change a residential area. To date, I don't think that any of the provisions that should have been taken. And from your site visits, you would have seen that they're a very long way off being able to make any of the guarantees that they should really be able to. So I would just reiterate our position that we wish for this to be rejected and dismissed. But we welcome the possibility for a further licence to be brought forward, which could be more negotiable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Middleton. Thanks for joining us this morning. Thank you for your time and your representation. It's appreciated. Mr. Cross, is there anything that you would like to add to sum up your representation?
Hello. Yes, just that I strongly object to the proposals as they stand at the moment regarding the sale of alcohol, the timings, the live music. I just don't think it is in keeping with St Andrew's industrial estate, and I hope it is rejected. Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you for your time this morning, and thank you for your representation and your comments. It's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And then if we could go to Mr. Seal and Mr. Alford for your summing up, please.
Thank you, Chair. You've heard from me on the operating schedule and the conditions, so unless you wish to hear further, I'm not going to deal with those. What I do want to say is this. I'm sorry that the residents don't feel there's been genuine consultation or that they feel slighted. As your licensing officer rightly pointed out, the notice itself is the consultation period. unfortunately, it's not possible to consult everyone all the time. I think that this case boils down to two things. One, the objectors don't like the hours, and we say that given the conditions that we're offering and given the measures that we will put in place above and beyond those conditions as part of operating this premises, you can have confidence that my client will promote the 4 licensing objectives in the way that this premises is operated. And I think that the vast bulk of the things that you're being asked to take into account here are actually relevant to planning. And planning and licensing are separate regimes. Planning permission was granted for this premises back in 2017, 2018. There's lots of consultation that went into that. And the premises license is a natural step forward in the context of opening what Mr. Middleton helpfully refers to as my duck-billed platypus, the family leisure complex that Mr. Seal and Seals Cove want to open at this trading estate and want to make a really nice premises for the local area and one that everyone can use and be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alford and Mr. Seal, for your time this morning, and again for your comments and your representation. Catherine, the licensing team leader, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
No, I don't think I've got anything else to add. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I will just go to our legal advisor now, just to clarify that the relevant points have been addressed.
Hello, Chairman. Yes, I think everything's been covered and there's nothing that I think I need to add.
Okay. I hope that everybody feels as though they have had the opportunity to speak and to put their representations across. If there is any last minute things that you might want to have left out, which would be a comment, now is your time to speak, because I will shortly be drawing this meeting to an end, so we as we 3 councillors couldn't go and have our summing up case on our decision. So in which case, bear with me, I seem to have Mr. Alford.
Yes, Chair, sorry, it's just a point of clarification, just in terms of this decision, and forgive me if I've missed it. How do you intend to make your decision today? Do we need to stay on the line for it to be communicated, or is it sent out in writing? Sorry, I missed that.
I'm coming on to that.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Did I have another? Oh, did I have another hand up?
Yes, it's Dr. King here. I've put my hand up.
Hello.
Hello. Sorry to. Yeah, I just have a question. It's taken a while to get our heads around the difference. I'm one of the residents of St Andrews Gardens. The difference between licensing and planning, and I feel much clearer about that now. What do we do if we remain concerned? This is just a question, because I think you'll probably know the answer, about car parking and the increase in traffic then, because the parking issues down our road, which is a private road, have been legion. They go back about the 25 years I've lived here. And we've got a balance. It works really well at the moment, but I think that's going to change. Who do we contact about that, or is it too late?
That would have been something that would have been discussed in the planning process.
But at that time, we weren't aware that this business was going to be the extent that it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no expert in planning. Okay. But I do believe that would have been the time for those comments to have been made. I appreciate that you.
I've just brought it up because Councillor Pipe brought it up, and it's. I don't touch on anything regarding planning. I appreciate that. That's fair enough
for a premises. But if it puts your mind at ease, I will Councillor Pipe has his hand up, and I believe he has some involvement in planning, I will let him just very, very briefly.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't want to take up
But
time.
just to be mindful that, you know, we are here purely for the premises licence. But
Yes,
I will let Councillor Pipe briefly answer that if he can.
Thank you.
Just purely on the planning side of parking, when your premises were built, which is clearly perhaps 25 years or more ago, all the parking considerations would have been listened to by the planning board, and if you still have problems with parking, then that changes from planning to the highways team. And if you have any representations you need to make about parking in St Andrews Gardens, then you need to make those representations to the highways team at Dorset Council. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I've been round this many times. It's a private road, so highways don't cover it. There's all sorts of issues.
Unadopted road.
Yes, it's an unadopted road that belongs to 3 different people, or different sets of people. So it's always really complicated when people park illegally in it. It's gone on and on. I can't even start. But I'm just really mindful that this will will change things quite a bit, and I'm worried about it because we've had lots of problems in the past. But anyway, I know this isn't the forum, so
yeah, no, it will be that will be a comment that obviously we will discard because we can't take a comment.
Yes,
regarding.
I understand that. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Weller, did you have any comment?
Only that I would suggest Dr. speaks to her ward councillor or councillors on that issue, and they may be able to give her some advice.
Okay, thank you. We have no more hands up. Thank you very much. In which case the public part of the meeting will now conclude. The subcommittee will consider its decision in private with the Democratic Services Officer in a remote attendance, and the legal advisor will only be called upon if we need legal guidance. The decision of the licensing subcommittee shall be communicated to the parties and made available on the council's website as soon as practicable and within the prescribed time limit of 5 working days. Obviously, we will be closing this meeting, so we won't actually be coming back into another meeting to give you our decision, and that's as to whether a decision is made today, because obviously some decisions can take some time. But I will just pass over finally just to Catherine, just to clarify if that's correct. And regarding the decision, obviously all parties do have 21 days to appeal once they receive the decision notice. Catherine, can you just confirm the timescale on the decision notice, please?
Yeah, the decision notice will be sent out within its prescribed limit of 5 working days. And like you quite rightly mentioned, once it's been sent out, there is 21 days to appeal to the Magistrates Court, but it'll all be in the decision letter. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for your time. Really appreciate it, and I will now officially close this meeting. Thank you.